Welcome to Wonderslate. Subscribe to our Telegram channel given in the description to updates and study materials. Topic for today's quiz is Measures of Dispersion. Question number 1. The degree of variation among the values is evaluated by various measures of Option A. Central tendency. Option B. Dispersion. Option C. Both A and B. Option D. None of them. The correct answer is Option B. Dispersion. Measures of dispersion attempt to describe the spread of the data values in a data set. Dispersion, also called variability, scatter, or spread, is the extent to which a distribution is stretched or squeezed. Common examples of measures of statistical dispersion are the variance, standard deviation, and interquartile range. Question number 2. A good dispersion should have following characteristics except Option A. It should be simple to understand. Option B. It should lend itself for algebraic manipulation. Option C. It should be rigidly defined. Option D. It should be based on extreme values. The correct answer is Option D. It should be based on extreme values. It should be based on all the items so as to be more representative of whole series. Question number 3. There are two types of measures of dispersion. Option A. Nominal measure of dispersion and relative measure of dispersion. Option B. Nominal measure of dispersion and real measure of dispersion. Option C. Absolute measure of dispersion and relative measure of dispersion. Option D. Real measure of dispersion and relative measure of dispersion. The correct answer is Option C. Absolute measure of dispersion and relative measure of dispersion. Absolute measure of dispersion include range, quartile deviation, standard deviation, variance, and relative measure of dispersion include coefficient of range, coefficient of quartile deviation, coefficient of standard deviation, coefficient of variance. Question number 4. Following are the relative measures of dispersion except Option A. Coefficient of range. Option B. Coefficient of quartile deviation. Option C. Coefficient of mean deviation. Option D. Standard deviation. The correct answer is Option D. Standard deviation. It is an absolute measure of dispersion. Question number 5. Half of the difference between the first and third quartiles. Option A. Median. Option B. QD. Option C. Q1. Option D. Q3. The correct answer is Option B. QD. It is based on the lower quartile Q1 and the upper quartile Q3. The difference Q3 minus Q1 is called the interquartile range. The difference Q3 minus Q1 divided by 2 is called semi-interquartile range or the quartile deviation. Question number 6. Standard deviation is also called Option A. Mean square deviation. Option B. Root mean square deviation. Option C. Mean deviation. Option D. Square deviation. The correct answer is Option B. Root mean square deviation. Standard deviation is square root of variance, which is also known as mean square deviation. Question number 7. Square of standard deviation is called Option A. Variance. Option B. Root mean square deviation. Option C. Square deviation. Option D. Mean square deviation. The correct answer is Option A. Variance. The standard deviation is a measure of how spread out numbers are. Its symbol is sigma, the Greek letter sigma. The formula is easy, it is the square root of the variance. So the square of sigma is variance. Question number 8. The positive square root of the arithmetic mean of the square of the deviations of the given observation from their arithmetic mean is called. Option A. Quartile deviation. Option B. Mean deviation. Option C. Variance. Option D. Standard deviation. The correct answer is option D. Standard deviation. Standard deviation is the positive square root of the mean of squared deviations from mean. So if there are 5 values x1, x2, x3, x4 and x5, first their mean is calculated. Then deviations of the values from mean are calculated. These deviations are then squared. The mean of these squared deviations is the variance. Positive square root of the variance is the standard deviation. Question number 9. The average of the squared deviations from the arithmetic mean is called the. Option A. Mean deviation. Option B. Standard deviation. Option C. Quartile deviation. Option D. Variance. The correct answer is option D. Variance. Variance is the expectation of the squared deviation of a random variable from its mean. Informally, it measures how far a set of random numbers are spread out from their average value. The variance is the square of the standard deviation, the second central moment of a distribution, and the covariance of the random variable with itself. Question number 10. Formula given below is used to calculate. Option A. Mean deviation. Option B. Quartile deviation. Option C. Variance. Option D. Standard deviation. The correct answer is option D. Standard deviation. It's a step deviation method to calculate standard deviation. Question number 11. Absolute measures of dispersion are. Option A. Expressed in terms of original unit of series. Option B. Expressed in ratios or percentage, also known as coefficients of dispersion. Option C. Both A and B. Option D. None of them. The correct answer is option A. Expressed in terms of original unit of series. These measures give us an idea about the amount of dispersion in a set of observations. They give the answers in the same units as the units of the original observations. When the observations are in kilograms, the absolute measure is also in kilograms. Question number 12. The main disadvantage of the standard deviation is. Option A. It is difficult to calculate by hand. Option B. It takes into account all the values in the data set. Option C. It is a sensitive measure of dispersion. Option D. It is used in many other statistical techniques. The correct answer is option A. It is difficult to calculate by hand. It is very hard for a person to calculate square root and even square of deviations. Formula of standard deviation is very hard to remember. Question number 13. The variance. Option A. Produces small values in square units due to taking the square root of deviations. Option B. Should be adjusted when we want to generalize from a sample to a population. Option C. Cannot be calculated on continuous data. Option D. Involves squaring deviation scores and then dividing them together. The correct answer is option B. Should be adjusted when we want to generalize from a sample to a population. Since variance is a relative measure which is free from the units in which the values have been expressed, they can be compared even across different groups having different units of measurement. Question number 14. The interquartile range, option A, is normally used when the measure of central tendency is the mode. Option B, relies on 4 values and therefore does not provide a measure of dispersion. Option C, is representative of the middle 50% of values in the data set. Option D, can be calculated by subtracting the median from the 4th quartile. The correct answer is option C, is representative of the middle 50% of values in the data set. In descriptive statistics, the interquartile range, IQR, also called the mid-spread or middle 50%, or technically H-spread, is a measure of statistical dispersion, being equal to the difference between 75th and 25th percentiles, or between upper and lower quartile. IQR equals Q3 minus Q1. Thank you for watching the video. If you'd like practice this quiz, then download the Wonderslate app now, link in the description below. If you have any suggestion for us, feel free to leave comments. If you liked the video and want to see more of it, hit the thumbs up and don't forget to click on subscribe button to get more updates of the future videos.